Hey, have you ever got up in the morning and checked your clock and it reads 5 a.m.? And then you take what seems like a 20-minute rest, but when you check the clock again, it reads 6 a.m.? And you say to yourself, where did all the time go? Or have you been in a situation where you have many things to do during the course of the day and you can't seem to get everything done in the day like you used to? Well, the reason for the sensation of less time is because there is, in reality, less time. Welcome to Back to the Basics, where you learn facts, hope you embrace it. Watch, like, share, bring in awareness. Watch, like, share, bring in awareness. I'm fearless. Welcome to Back to the Basics, where you learn facts, hope you embrace it. Watch, like, share, bring in awareness. Watch, like, share, bring in. Now, you may be asking, how can there be less time? Well, I have explained in previous videos that this time that we presently live by begins honestly with the second, purposely ignoring the first, and that there is time in between the tick and the tock of the clock that is not accounted for, and thus you have a space of time that you do not use, and therefore the rest of your time that is not accounted for is up for grabs. What that means is your time is deceiving you. It has been shortened since your time warp, which started in 1940. And unfortunately, that is why so many people are being reported as being missing. Many are extra-dimensional abductions, accept it or not. There are more chances now than ever to be abducted, so be very careful because you can get caught in time. We are going through what is called a time continuum change. The best way to explain this is if I ask you, do you remember your birthday? You'll say, yes. Then if I ask you, do you remember the things you did on your birthday? You'll say, yes again. Now the fact that you can keep referring to the day in your mind, locking in on that point in time, makes that day continue on for as long as you remember it. So in a sense, it never ends, and thus it literally still is happening right now. You see, now is an actual event that began in the midst of the created state of nothingness or void of your time zone in order to create something in it. At that very point is now. It does not refer simply to living in the present, although that is strongly recommended. What that means is a time warp is truly occurring, and it will continue to accelerate until now is fully reached and the dimensions can finally interface. In other words, where that in which you cannot see, called nothingness, which is something, becomes one with that in which you can see, called something, much like a plane landing in an airport at a predetermined time. The cause for this strange anomaly of less time is due to the invention of a time machine in what is known as the Philadelphia experiment, which defies conventional understanding of space and time. Now, I know many of you are saying that there's no such thing as a time machine, and that's just what they want you to believe. You see, because of the Invention Secrecy Act, the government do not have to disclose information about new inventions such as this. And for every invention that they don't want you to know about, they cover it up by using power words like it's a possible threat to national security. The Philadelphia experiment is an experiment funded by the US Navy that took place in 1943 AD. The reason you should be concerned with this experiment is because whether you know it or not, you are being affected by what happened in that Philadelphia harbor on August 12, 1943. That changed history forever. The purpose of this experiment was to accomplish teleportation of a warship, namely the USS Eldridge, from Philadelphia to dock near Norfolk, Virginia, by using Einstein's unified field theory. This theory is a type of field theory that allows all that is usually thought of as fundamental forces and elementary particles to be written in terms of a pair of physical and virtual fields. The Navy explored a further extension using this theory to accomplish radars and visual invisibility, which caused this warship and crew to disappear on that day. There were quite a few scientists that were directly involved, such as Nikola Tesla, von Neumann, Thomas Townsend Brown, Duncan Cameron, and his brother Edward A. Cameron, who is now known as Alfred Bellick, and many others. In 1940, the first test was conducted on a Navy tender off the seacoast of the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and it was successful. However, it had no personnel on board. The second test was conducted on USS Eldridge, where there were personnel on board in the Philadelphia harbor. They fired up the ship and it became invisible for about 20 minutes. They then shut it off and the crew was thoroughly disorientated, and their minds and their bodies were severely affected. The scientists involved sought to fix the problem, but was given a deadline, August 12, 1943, by the Navy to get the experiment completed anyway. As they approached the time for the third test, they were shaky because they knew things were still wrong, but they chose to follow their orders. So once they turned on the high voltage generators that Tesla made, the magnetic pull of it created enough energy to make for invisibility, and simultaneously made a time tunnel or a time machine that locked up into hyperspace 40 years to the day of August 12, 1943. The ship disappeared and the crew started to go crazy, for it was affecting them psychologically and physiologically. And two Navy men named Alfred Bellick and Duncan Cameron jumped over the side of the ship, expecting to land in the water, but instead wound up in a time tunnel and landed on the ground in Montauk Army Base in Long Island, New York in 1983. That is exactly 40 years in the future. When Duncan and Bellick landed in 1983, they were met by Dr. Von Neumann of that time stream, who was much older, and he already knew that they were coming. You could only imagine how shocked they must have been. He then told them about the lockup in space that had to be cut off, but it could not be done in 1983. The Eldridge was the source of the power back in 1943, so he told them they had to go back through the time tunnel and shut it off. When they went back through to shut off the power source, the energy from the generators caused the switch to melt, so the power could not be turned off. They then smashed the equipment and the generators went down. But the vortex was actually locked open between the periods of 1943 and 1983. Now, the time tunnels opens up every 10 years from 1943 on the three, that is 1953, 1963, 1973, 1983, and so forth. The next year of the opening of the vortex will be 2023. During the periods between 1943 and 1983, the US government had a switch that generated the energy which caused the vortex to open and lock at will, making spacecrafts randomly crash. If you did some research, you would find that around that time, there was an increased number of UFO sightings all over the world, for they were coming into this dimension through the vortex and being snatched up. This, however, had a tremendous effect on the planet, for every time a craft entered the Earth's atmosphere, it affects the harmonic grid. Now, how does that affect us living on the planet? Well, harmonics relates to music, and music relates to sound, and sound relates to vibration, and vibration relates to frequencies. Everything on the earth vibrates at different frequencies. Some things have a series of frequencies because they are made up of a variety of materials. Those materials are in turn made up of atoms, and atoms are formed by electromagnetic waves that have a specific frequency. With that said, the earth is made up of billions of different materials and objects. Therefore, it operates at a huge number of frequencies. And anything that affects the harmonic resonant frequency of the earth also affects everything inside the earth, which includes you. This merely means that the planet is thrown off and you are no longer aligned with her anymore. And because of this, the world is in total chaos, unbeknown to most, because evil is now fair seeming. And so the time is now. You must be prepared to engage for your genetic alignment, but you have to be taught to vibrate on a frequency that will link you in and attune your soul with the sacred tones of the earth as well as the universe. This is the awakening period for this cycle, and you must be returned to your natural nature before it's too late. And thus some of your DNA codes was set to go off right now. I'm Kef Ray, and this is Back to the Basic. Like, share, and subscribe. Facts we stated, you wanna know something, go back to basics. Most saw a trap and was called the Matrix. The world frivolized, yet it's hard to face it. So I spread truth, hope